The North Atlantic is a place of ghosts. Cold winds sweep across the steel-gray waters, carrying memories of convoys, battles, and the wreckage of empires. In our timeline, 2 German battleships dominated these seas in fear and reputation, but never together in full force. Bismarck, the pride of the Kriegsmarine, was hunted down after her brief, blazing sortie in 1941. Tirpitz, her sister, lingered in Norwegian fjords, a sleeping giant bound by Allied bombers until her end in 1944. They were sisters in steel, but never partners in war. But what if history bent in another direction? What if Bismarck survived her first battle, slipping away from British hunters, and Tirpitz joined her in the North Atlantic? 2 behemoths unleashed at once. Together, they were a nightmare for Allied convoys, a pair of predators stalking the sea. This is the story of that alternate world, where the fate of oceans and empires trembled under the thunder of not one, but 2 giants of war. Imagine the spring of 1941. Bismarck has just crippled HMS Hood, the pride of Britain, sending her to the bottom of the Atlantic in a single fiery explosion. In our reality, Bismarck herself was cornered, her steering crippled, and her end swift. But here, her captain Ernst Lindemann and Admiral Lütjens are lucky, or perhaps simply more cautious. A smokescreen, a false trail, the cover of a violent squall, whatever the detail, Bismarck evades her pursuers. She limps back to occupied France, battered but alive, and the Reich trumpets her survival as proof that Germany cannot be matched at sea. Her sister ship Tirpitz, still fitting out in the Baltic, is rushed to completion. Berlin sees an opportunity, a window of terror on the Atlantic, and presses for the sisters to operate together. Within a year, the impossible becomes reality. Bismarck and Tirpitz, nearly identical in silhouette, their 15-inch guns capable of shredding cruisers, their armor thick enough to laugh off most shells, steam side by side into the open ocean. For Britain, this is not just a threat. It is an existential crisis. Churchill, ever haunted by the shadow of blockade, understands immediately what 2 roaming battleships mean. They are not built to invade or hold territory. They are built to strangle. The convoys carrying food, weapons, and lifeblood from America now face twin predators. One Bismarck was enough to send shockwaves through the Admiralty. 2 together could paralyze the sea lanes, force convoys to stay in port, or worse, draw the Royal Navy into battles it could not afford. The first sortie comes in 1942. Somewhere in the icy stretch between Greenland and Iceland, convoy HX-183 steams eastward, 40 merchantmen, their decks stacked with tanks, trucks, and wheat, escorted by a screen of destroyers and the battleship King George V. The sea is heavy, rain sweeping in low curtains, and then, on the horizon, 2 gray shapes emerge. Tirpitz and Bismarck, hulls knifing through the waves, main guns already trained. The clash is thunder and fire. King George V is outgunned, her escort shredded by the secondary batteries of the sisters. Shells arc across the rain, orange fireballs tearing into the convoy. Merchant ships erupt, their cargo turned to flaming wreckage. The ocean becomes a graveyard of steel. The Royal Navy retreats, limping, humiliated. The convoy is broken, scattered, half of it sent to the bottom. For the first time in centuries, the Atlantic does not feel like Britain's sea. It feels contested. The Admiralty debates desperate measures. Should more carriers be risked on patrol? Should the home fleet concentrate in one mass to hunt them down? Every option comes at a cost. To protect convoys, ships must be pulled from the Mediterranean. To guard against German raiders, ships cannot face the Japanese in the Pacific. Britain, stretched thin already, feels the strain. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the propaganda machine revels in the victory. Goebbels paints the image of the 2 sisters as Valkyries of steel, punishing British arrogance. Hitler, who never trusted the Navy, suddenly sees value in his giants, and for the sailors who serve aboard them, there is a grim pride. They are legends in motion, but also marked men. They know every sortie risks the full wrath of the Royal Navy, and yet they steam on. The United States, still not fully in the war, watches with alarm. Roosevelt's arsenal of democracy depends on those convoys. 2 German battleships, free on the Atlantic, are not just naval threats, they are political weapons. Each convoy lost makes intervention more urgent, more inevitable. Already American destroyers escort convoys as far as Iceland. Now the question becomes whether America must commit its own battleships even before Pearl Harbor drags it into full war. The stakes rise. In this alternate world, the Atlantic becomes a chessboard of steel. Britain cannot afford to lose. Germany cannot afford to waste its giants. The Allies scramble for answers, longer-range patrol planes, more aircraft carriers, wolf packs of submarines shadowing the sisters. But the truth is simple. Tirpitz and Bismarck, together, change the rhythm of the war, and in this frozen sea of possibilities, a question lingers like mist. Could 2 battleships, even mighty ones, actually change the fate of the Second World War? Or were they doomed, no matter their victories, to fall beneath the weight of an empire that refused to yield? That is where our journey begins, with the roar of guns over the Atlantic and the shadow of two giants cutting across the horizon. The shock of that first joint strike reverberates far beyond the convoy lanes. In London, the War Cabinet gathers in tense silence. Charts are spread across the table, red ink showing convoys destroyed, escorts sunk, and the suspected routes of the German sisters. Churchill, cigar clenched between his teeth, delivers his verdict with characteristic thunder. Britain must hunt them down at all costs. The Royal Navy, he insists, must never lose command of the sea. Yet even he knows the reality. Britain's strength lies in numbers, but not always in the right place at the right time. Bismarck and Tirpitz are not mere ships. They are symbols of defiance. They do not need to destroy every convoy to win. They only need to create fear. For every sighting report, convoys hesitate in port. For every rumor of their guns, ships scatter into the fog. The mere possibility of ambush paralyzes the Atlantic lifeline, and that lifeline is all that keeps Britain alive. The Admiralty responds with massive force. Carriers are deployed in wider sweeps, their aircraft straining against the vast distances of the ocean. New bases in Iceland and Newfoundland are fortified, sending long-range patrol bombers to scour the seas. Yet the Atlantic is too large, and the sisters too cunning. They vanish into storms, strike without warning, then fade back into the emptiness. The sailors aboard the convoys feel it most. The tension of scanning the horizon, of waiting for the sudden boom of heavy guns. Veterans begin to whisper about the gray ghosts, ships that appear out of nowhere and leave only wreckage behind. Merchant captains write in their logs that the sea itself feels haunted, and in truth, it is. For the first time since Napoleon, Britain's mastery of the sea feels challenged. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the admirals of the Kriegsmarines savor their long-awaited moment. For years they lived in the shadow of the Luftwaffe, their pleas ignored. Now, with two steel queens ruling the Atlantic, they claim the stage. Admiral Raeder argues that Germany must invest fully in surface warfare. Submarines may starve Britain slowly, but battleships bring glory, terror, and speed. Hitler listens, rarely enthusiastic about naval dreams, but seduced by the drama of victories that make headlines across the world. Yet even as Berlin rejoices, a problem lurks beneath the triumph. The sisters are powerful, but they are also alone. The German Navy has no fleet to match the combined strength of Britain and America. Two ships, no matter how fearsome, cannot hold an ocean forever. And every sortie burns fuel, stretches crews, and risks disaster. The admirals know this, even if propaganda does not. Their next great strike comes in the summer of 1942. The Allies, learning from their mistakes, send a heavily escorted convoy through the mid-Atlantic gap. This time, the sisters do not attack blindly. Instead, they coordinate with wolf packs of U-boats. At dawn, submarines surface to harass the convoy, drawing the escorts away. Hours later, the horizon trembles with the thunder of battleship guns. Tirpitz and Bismarck fall upon the scattered ships like predators upon a herd. The sky turns black with smoke. A Liberty ship carrying Sherman tanks erupts in flame. A freighter packed with wheat splits in two, her cargo spilling into the sea. Escorts dash back, firing torpedoes, but they are met by a storm of secondary fire. Destroyers sink, keeling over into the waves. The convoy commander signals frantic distress calls, begging for carrier planes to arrive. By the time they do, half the convoy is gone. For Roosevelt, this is the breaking point. America can no longer stand aside. The Atlantic is not just Britain's struggle, it is America's future. The United States declares open naval war in the Atlantic, months before Pearl Harbor in this alternate timeline. Battleships from the U.S. Navy join the hunt, and the convoy system becomes a combined Anglo-American shield. The war, once balanced on the edge of Europe, now stretches across the ocean, and yet, even with American steel joining the chase, the sisters continue to survive. Their armor shrugs off cruiser fire. Their speed allows them to vanish into fog banks. Aircraft carriers prove dangerous, but weather often saves the giants, storms shielding them from torpedo bombers. Each time the Allies believe they have cornered the hunters, they slip away, leaving behind burning wreckage as proof of their passage. But the strain begins to tell. Sailors aboard Tirpitz and Bismarck grow weary. The endless tension of being hunted gnaws at them. When they sleep, it is with the knowledge that a fleet may be converging upon them at that very moment. Supplies grow short, repairs take longer, the crews become legends in Germany, but prisoners of their own fame. They cannot rest in harbor for fear of Allied bombers. They cannot linger at sea for fear of discovery. Every moment is a gamble with fate, and in London, Churchill sees the chance for a decisive moment. He orders a trap. Intelligence intercepts suggest the sisters will attempt another breakout. This time, the Royal Navy will be ready. Carriers, battleships, and cruisers form a net across the Atlantic, with American reinforcements steaming from the west. The largest fleet assembled since Jutland waits to spring. The stage is set. Two sisters of steel on one side, the combined wrath of two empires on the other. Somewhere in the Atlantic, fate prepares to decide whether their legend will endure or whether the sea will claim them at last. The clash is coming, and it will be unlike anything the world has ever seen. The sea is restless. The fourth day of this alternate war dawns gray and cold, and the Atlantic seems to sense what is coming. It is no longer a question of if, but when. Both sisters, bruised and weary, circle in a deadly dance, and now the final moves begin. On the Bismarck, the hangar bays rumble with furious activity. Sailors move like shadows, hauling shells the size of men into waiting hoists. The deck guns are cleaned, oiled, their barrels pointing toward the horizon as if eager for battle. Below decks, engineers sweat in the engine rooms, coaxing every ounce of power from the great turbines. Admiral Lutyens studies his charts with a silent calm, yet even he knows what lies ahead. They cannot run forever. If the enemy comes, they will stand and fight. Aboard Tirpitz, the scene is mirrored. Captain Karl Topp steals his crew with quiet words. They have trained for this, he tells them. They are not prey, they are the hunters. Yet deep inside, every sailor knows the truth. When the Royal Navy comes, it will come in numbers, and the sea itself may turn red before the end. The trap is closing. Allied signals intelligence, strengthened by new decoding successes, has charted their course. Carriers lie in wait, their decks alive with planes armed for torpedo strikes. British battleships, veterans of earlier hunts, steam in from the north. From the west, American ships bear down. North Carolina, Washington, and their escorts. The largest fleet yet assembled in the Atlantic converges upon two solitary giants. At dawn, the first strike comes from the sky. Swordfish torpedo bombers, slow and fragile, descend from cloud cover. In the real history of Bismarck, these biplanes played a decisive role. Here, their courage is doubled, but so is the challenge. The sisters, alert and ready, fill the air with fire. Flak bursts in black blossoms, shredding the skies. One by one, the swordfish tumble into the sea, their crews lost. Yet a handful break through. Torpedoes splash into the waves, streaking toward their targets. Bismarck shudders as one torpedo smashes into her hull. Tirpitz reels as another strikes her side, the thunder echoing across the ocean. But the giants remain afloat, wounded yet still moving. The air attack has slowed them, not stopped them, and now their turn comes. On the horizon, plumes of smoke appear. Royal Navy cruisers probing forward. The sisters do not hesitate. 15-inch shells roar from their turrets, streaking across miles of gray sea. A cruiser is hit, split in two in a single deafening strike. Another burns, her decks torn open. The escorts scatter, calling frantically for battleship support. The hunters have teeth. Hours pass in a deadly stalemate. The Allies circle like wolves, wearing down the prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The sisters, knowing time is against them, press forward, seeking to punch through the net. Each mile they gain feels like a miracle. Each shell they fire, an act of defiance. Then the great clash begins. The battleship King George V, survivor of the earlier disaster, appears from the mist. Alongside her steams HMS Rodney, her massive guns already trained. The sea between them and the sisters becomes an arena. Shells crisscross the waves, geysers of water leaping into the sky. The roar is deafening, unending, as giants trade blow after blow. Bismarck's deck erupts as a shell tears into her superstructure. Tirpitz answers with a broadside that slams into Rodney, tearing open her hull. Flames dance across both fleets, smoke rolling in thick curtains that blot out the sun. Every hit feels decisive, every minute a gamble with death. And then, from the west, the Americans arrive. North Carolina and Washington thunder into the battle, their shells joining the storm. The sisters now face 4 battleships at once, their odds collapsing with every passing moment. Yet they do not falter. Side by side, Bismarck and Tirpitz fire until their barrels glow red, until their magazines run low. The end comes slowly, brutally. Bismarck, her rudder damaged once more, begins to list. Shells rain down upon her, tearing open her armor, gutting her decks. She fights to the last, guns still barking defiantly even as the sea rises around her. Tirpitz circles desperately, shielding her sister, firing broadside after broadside in a frenzy of loyalty. For a moment, it seems she might hold them back, but the weight is too great. A shell from Washington pierces Tirpitz's citadel. Flames consume her interior, secondary explosions rippling through her hull. She staggers, slows, and finally begins to heel over. Her crew scramble, some leaping into the freezing water, others remaining at their posts, refusing to abandon their steel home. As the sun sets, the Atlantic is littered with wreckage. Lifeboats drift among oil slicks. The great sisters lie beneath the waves, their legends sealed in blood and fire. The Allies, though victorious, do not celebrate. Too many ships lie burning, too many lives were lost. For the men who watched it, the battle was not merely war, it was myth made real. 2 titans bound together, fighting against impossible odds. Their destruction marked the end of an era, the last stand of the great battleships. Yet the question lingers, what if they had broken through? What if Tirpitz and Bismarck had survived one more day, one more sortie, one more convoy shattered? Could the war itself have shifted, or was this always their fate, to stand defiant, to shake the world for a moment, and then to vanish into the deep? The ocean keeps its secrets, but the echo of their guns still haunts the waves. In the aftermath of that cataclysm, the Atlantic falls silent. The Allies, bloodied but victorious, continue their convoys with renewed determination. Britain breathes again, its lifeline intact, though the cost is heavy. Across the ocean, Roosevelt addresses the American people, his voice carrying the weight of both triumph and tragedy. He speaks of duty, of sacrifice, of the shared burden of freedom. The United States, once cautious, now stands fully committed. The war has become total. But in Berlin, the news spreads like wildfire, and the reaction is bitter. The death of Bismarck and Tirpitz is a wound not just to the Kriegsmarine, but to German pride itself. For a brief moment, the Reich believed it could contest the oceans, that its steel queens could strangle the enemy's throat. Now that dream lies shattered beneath the waves. Hitler rages, accusing his admirals of failure. Raeder, the architect of surface warfare, resigns in disgrace. From this moment forward, Germany's navy is no longer measured in giants of steel, but in packs of wolves. Submarines will carry the burden, silent and unseen. The age of the great battleship is over. Yet the legend of the sisters does not fade. In ports across Europe, sailors whisper of their courage, of the night the Atlantic burned. Survivors tell stories of standing at their guns even as decks split apart, of shells fired into the mist with nothing but defiance left to give. The Allies too remember. British and American sailors, hardened by war, quietly admit respect for their foes. No man could watch such ships go down without feeling awe. And so the tale of Bismarck and Tirpitz fighting together becomes a myth within a myth. Historians debate its meaning. Some argue it would have changed little. Germany, after all, lacked the industry, the oil, and the Allies to sustain such titans for long. Others say it might have stretched the war, buying time for other campaigns, weakening Britain before America's full weight could fall upon Europe. Perhaps the sisters, by terrorizing the Atlantic, could have delayed D-Day or forced concessions in the Mediterranean. But speculation is all that remains. For what matters most is not the outcome, but the idea. Two giants, side by side, turning the ocean into an arena of steel and fire. They embody the last gasp of an era where battleships ruled the waves. The carriers that replaced them would never inspire the same awe. Planes could sink ships, yes, but they could not stand as monuments of steel, as symbols carved into the horizon. Bismarck and Tirpitz were more than weapons. They were visions of a world that was already passing away. As the war rages on, their memory lingers. In the fjords of Norway, where Tirpitz once hid, the locals still speak of the mountain of steel that cast a shadow across the water. In the cold depths where Bismarck rests, divers find twisted wreckage, a cathedral of rust. And in the minds of sailors and historians alike, the question endures. What if they had lived longer, fought harder, survived to challenge again? The truth is, the ocean has no mercy. Technology was moving faster than steel could endure. Even if the sisters had shattered convoys, even if they had sunk more ships, the Allies would have adapted. Carriers, aircraft, radar, all these new tools were rising. Unstoppable. Battleships could still fight, but they could not win against time itself. The sisters were not only defeated by guns, but by the future. Still, their story holds a strange power, because it is not only about ships, it is about defiance, about standing together when the world itself turns against you, about loyalty between giants who knew they could not prevail, yet fought anyway. In that sense, Bismarck and Tirpitz did not lose. They became immortal. And perhaps that is why we return to their tale. To imagine a sea where two shadows haunted the horizon. To feel the chill of fear as convoys steamed into danger. To hear the thunder of their guns echo across the waves, even long after they were silenced. History is full of battles that were never fought, of wars that might have turned, of worlds that might have been. In those shadows, we find stories like this one. Haunting, impossible, but unforgettable. If you've been carried across these seas with me, if you've felt the weight of steel and the chill of the Atlantic in this alternate world, then I invite you to join us again, because history is never just what happened, it is also what might have happened, and together we will keep exploring those uncharted waters. Subscribe, so you don't miss the next journey into the past that never was. The ocean is vast, the echoes are endless, and the legends of Bismarck and Tirpitz will never truly fade.